Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our regular board meeting for July 22nd, 2024. Kinsey, can you do the roll call, please?
Crossan,
Here.
Gerlach,
Here.
Becker,
Here.
Lyerly,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Mills,
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Okay, all board members are here, and we are joined at the table by two of our ICSC Intercity Student Council members. Can you please introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Andres Mora. I'm a senior at Preble High School and I'm the Intercity Student Council President.
Hello, I'm Chanel Leopold from Preble High School. I'm the ICSC Vice President, and I'm going to be a junior this year.
Thank you. Welcome. Please chime in if you have any thoughts or questions. Okay, we did the roll call. Can you all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, would someone like to read the mission statement? Cool. So, someone else can do it. Got you, Brian? Okay.
We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Okay, thank you. And next, I'll read the land acknowledgement. We, the members of the Green Bay Area Public School District, recognize and honor the original inhabitants of Northeast Wisconsin. Our district lives, works, and learns upon the ancestral homelands of the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations and the current homeland of Oneida Nation. We acknowledge the 12 diverse and vibrant Wisconsin First Nations who have persevered here since before recorded time and continue to be integral parts of our community. We uphold our responsibility to repair relationships, initiate partnerships, and stand with all First Nation communities. Next on the agenda is our open forum. Do we have anybody, Kinsey? Okay. Anybody? Maybe next time. All right, moving on to our legislative update. Brian, did you have anything for us this month?
No.
Okay. Not much going on in Madison. So then next is our strategic plan. All right, go ahead, Rick.
All right, thank you. I'm going to invite David Johns to join us here at the table. I'm also going to be in this presentation. We'll be joined with by Lynn Gerlach, who is also, we've been working on the not only this presentation.
Hey,
but,
Rick, can you bring your mic just a little closer?
Okay.
Thank you. That's better.
All right, got it. Okay. Got it.
Oh, hang on.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
guys. If you guys can hit the pause on that. Andrew just reminded me that we didn't ask you guys if you had a report. That's my fault. Thank you, Andrew.
But it should be on the agenda. So it just
I think I might have.
Okay.
I think I might have removed it for the summer session to not put pressure on the students.
Do
But if
you
the
have a
board would
report?
like that?
We did make one this time.
Excellent. Then let's hear it. Go ahead, guys.
So over at East High School, the East Golf outing is taking place on July 27. They have a football game on August 6th, and the renovations are coming along nicely. At Preble football, basketball, and dance team are currently participating for their next seasons. Preble Youth Soccer Camp is taking place this weekend. 236 AP exams taken scored a free or higher this year, and the renovations are coming along nicely.
At Southwest, summer basketball clinics took place last week for future Southwest Trojans, And then soccer, football, and cheerleading practice are taking place this week. And at West, football, speed agility, summer classes are taking place. Cross-country open gyms are taking place twice a week. And renovations are coming along nicely. And for Jada, I couldn't find a lot, so.
Okay. Does that complete your report? All right, any questions? Go ahead, Brian.
Say East has a football game August 6th.
I found it on their website, but it said verse TBD, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Any other questions? Anybody? Thank you for having a report. We appreciate it. Things still go on, even if it's summer and we'll try to remember to remind to include you next time. Thank you. All right, now we're ready. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you. All right, I'm joined at the table by David Johns, and then Lynn Garley is also going to help with this presentation. This is a conversation, information, but we're going to seek at least some alignment and agreement as to the go forward portion of this for what the board and the district leadership will be doing for the strategic plan. You will note on this particular slide, there is a theme that reads, "Together we are one." That is our theme for the 24-25 school year. The concept as far as the strategic plan and how this relates to the strategic plan is that it unifies us towards one goal, one objective or set of objectives for our students, for the district, for the public, for everyone who's involved in this. This is an alignment document. The concept of a strategic plan, and some of this I'm elaborating before I get into the meat of the slide, is this is a working tool that keeps us all focused and aligned on the objective and the demonstration of the end state. You're going to hear some conversation about the portrait of a graduate that seeks to find and establish a vision for what it is that the district wants to see in our students. But this again is not just something generated at this level. It is public involvement. It is community involvement, student involvement, teacher involvement. Everyone has a part to play in the definition of this and as well the ownership of it. Next slide. So today, this is a conversation to review the purpose, process of the strategic plan. We're going to talk about ownership that sometimes seems to get some confusion. We want to give at least some amplification to the definition of ownership and the process for the life and the life cycle of the plan. We have purposely put ourselves on an aggressive timeline. And that is in recognition of, first and foremost, is that the previous portion of the strategic plan has technically expired, but it doesn't mean we've been flying without a net. It just simply means that it's past time that we review where we are, where we want to be at the future state, and then the methodology to get us there and to define measures of success. It is also interconnected with the conversation about the upcoming referendum. The referendum and the strategic plan, although operationally different conversations, they are all related because part of the referendum and the things that are being asked for are in line with the strategic priorities and the strategic objectives. And then here again, to seek some active commitment from the board members to go forth and gather the necessary bits of information from various constituencies to talk about the things that we need to do to move forward with this. And again, this is about unifying and alignment and focus and priorities. Give you a chance to read that because I'm going to amplify a couple of words in here. This is what is stated in our board policy. So the policy makes this an imperative. This is something that we must do. But I think it's good to have the conversation to understand why we made this a policy. Why do this? Everything that happens in this district connects to the strategic plan. That thus makes this a working, living tool, not just words that once drafted go on the board or rather go on the shelf. For example, the CFO would use the outlines of this plan to help prioritize spending initiatives. Human resource would have this would use this as the impetus for personnel priority hiring and job descriptions, performance criteria. Operations, as laid out with the referendum, we talk about building upgrades and the safety requirements. And then the board uses this as the direction for policy. It helps to decide. Anything that comes before the board will have a connection to the strategic plan. Here's how what we're asking for relates to the strategic objectives. So in my mind, this simplifies life for everyone because it makes life easier because it clarifies intent. And it keeps us from being pulled through our day as opposed to us figuring out where it is that we want to be at some future point in time. So here again, this is an all-inclusive concept, not planned unilaterally, not planned by any one entity. There's ownership by board, by staff, students, families, citizens. We really have already started this process by asking the community to get involved. We're asking business level leaders to give some input for definition and vision. Again, the strategic plan is comprised of our mission, our vision, our strategic priorities, and our goal. And then the superintendent ensures that the process is carried out. Little side conversation about the superintendent. In our upcoming search for a superintendent, the strategic plan is the conversation piece by which prospective candidates will be interviewed, as opposed to no plan and not really knowing what it is that we want. So the plan itself will define what the criteria is for superintendent. And then the board obviously has final authority for adoption of the plan and its components. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Thanks, Mr. Cross, and good evening, board. I'm going to share with you some thoughts on this idea of ownership and accountability for the strategic plan. Sometimes in the work of developing a plan, a distraction comes about around who owns the plan, who owns the work, who's responsible for it. Keeping with a theme and not in any way forcing a fit to the theme, the answer is all of us are, and at different times, some with more intensity than others. So when we think about ownership for a plan that might be more in line with heavier on the staff level, that comes in the form of some of the checkpoints and components that the staff are committed to developing and then putting forward for you for your review. When it comes to applying discipline and organizing accountability measures and conversations with staff based on strategic priorities and goals, that's a moment where ownership and accountability with you as the board. Mr. Crossan referred to a process that has recently begun, and it's one that my hope is that you're all closely connected to, and some of you had an opportunity to see it. But the real origins of all of this work and the opportunity ahead for us is to generate and source data and input from the community on an incredibly large scale, so that with much more clarity than if we were just looking at data coming from student performance or attendance or staff retention, we now have that in addition to a refreshed vision for what the community wants our schools and needs our schools to be for our students. And that's the portrait of a graduate work, which I'll allude to here a little bit more in the next slide. When Mr. Crossan outlined the objectives for this time together tonight, he zeroed in on representing the phases of the planning for this work. This is the compressed and accelerated timeline that takes us through the middle of the fall and identifies each of those components that by board policy you're responsible for approving and authorizing us to continue the work. So rather than this being set up as a single moment where as staff we come to you with all of the pieces, this is a rolling build where almost once each month moving through the fall, we'll bring before you components of the plan and each will build on the next. We've already begun the work with Portrait of a Graduate, and what an amazing coincidence and timing that we're able to pursue that kind of engagement with our community at the same time we're launching the plan for the next 5 years of our success as a district. Even if we had a strategic plan, this would be the right work to do, to go out and really get that refresh view of what the community is expecting of us. It's a great coincidence that we can actually use that to fuel and launch this process. You'll see on the right column here, various stages of your role. Each of them is connected to the work of other groups that are mobilized at different stages of this process. So you'll see as we move into September, we'll have the data and the feedback from our community and all of the summer events and back to school nights and other engagements that we'll talk about in a moment to really examine our mission and vision and ask that question, are we continuing to be what we said we wanted to be well over a decade ago when the last mission and vision was crafted? We'll have our data from all of our priority areas that we currently operate under. There's 4 of them. And we'll match that data with how we're actually doing. So for example, personalized pathways represents one of our current strategic priorities in the plan that most recently was in effect. This would be the time to look at our data and say, did we deliver on that? Is that a priority that, if that priority is still valid to our community, where were we successful and where do we still have gaps? That's going to be heavily staff work to do, and we're going to dig into existing data sources and new sources of data to be able to answer that question. Did we fulfill the priorities that we said we were fulfilling in the last plan that was a span of 2018 to 2023? That'll culminate with a set of goals that are established, which will help us focus budgeting and staffing for the 25-26 school year. I know it looks early to have those conversations, but you're all well aware that that is winter work, already thinking about staffing for the next year, establishing professional learning priorities, so on and so forth. So here's some identified areas where your involvement will be critical and necessary to the process, and it shows that laid out over the fall. Mr. Crossan mentioned for the life of the strategic plan. This is just the birth of the strategic plan. The work of the board and the partnership with the staff and the community will continue in ways that are going to be all about focusing on results, monitoring our goals over multi-years. The staff will establish a much more granular set of strategic objectives, the actual steps that we will take to meet those goals. So much follows this, but for your review today, this is just the launch of the plan. Okay, Lynn.
Sorry. So my part is just to remind us why we're doing this. We are not doing this because the state of Wisconsin said you must now do this. We're not doing it to look smart or look like we dotted our I's. We're doing it for the learner and the learning environment, which is why we do everything. So that's why we have that great picture of students. So to remind us that the strategic plan pulls together everything that we do, and that will include the search for a permanent superintendent. It will include the consolidation effort that has been going on for so long, including the referendum that we're going to talk about tonight. So all of that is to build and improve the learner and the learning environment. Okay, so it's not,
This corner.
oh, this button, they didn't tell me what button to press. There we go. So as you know, we've been talking in terms of the referendum and the efforts that we have to make on our buildings, that our first concern is safety and security for students and staff. And you know that this refers to secure entrances, positions of offices in the buildings. It refers to AODA requirements to make sure that everything is safe and secure and accessible for everyone. Okay, we also are talking about, with this referendum, assuming that we decide to go forward with it, and assuming we ask the taxpayers to support it, and they do, that we will be able to create optimal learning and working spaces. So it's not just about closing schools and saving money. It's about making the schools those students are going to optimal, the very best that they can be, and make it a really good learning environment. And then the result is to be an environment for educational excellence in every way: teaching, physical environment, social, emotional environment, etc. So now it's time to ask you folks to be a part of this, because it's not just a committee or just the staff, as David and Rick have both pointed out. So first of all, we're going to talk to you about our commitment. That RNL stands for Rick and Lynn. We're not as formal as you, David. Okay, so, you know, Rick, before he became a school board member, was a longtime military officer and has served as a high-ranking executive in local industry. And so he has been immersed in strategic planning for many years. The L stands for Lynn, and I, of course, being a military wife doesn't do that at all. But having been an educator for most of my adult life, I bring a different perspective. And some of you know that I have been immersed in strategic foresight for the last 5 years, which goes beautifully with strategic planning, but it's not exactly the same thing. So what we plan to do is to actively plan with staff for the next steps in the process, and we've been doing that already. We plan to continue that. We plan to, when we're asked or when we're wanted, we will co-facilitate events seeking community feedback and input. And then our plan is to come to you, I don't know, maybe quarterly, and provide updates and lead discussion at different checkpoints in the progress of the plan. So what are we asking from the rest of the board? We're asking for your active support. We're asking all of the board members to engage invested parties to promote participation. In other words, going out into the community and seeking input and opinions and insight. We're asking you to think about this, your circle of influence, where you can promote some events, where you can help people understand what the strategic planning process is and how they can be involved. And we're asking you to engage as critical partners to ensure a quality strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years, understanding, of course, that there will be a sub-plan built into it, which will be the plan for how we're going to continue to refresh and revisit the plan. So I think that Rick will take it from here.
Yep. That concludes the presentation. Again, just to circle back to this point about together we are one, just to reiterate the fact that we're all in this together, and we should, and to say that we all want to do the right thing. The strategic plan, by definition, defines the right thing. And that just keeps for good alignment and focus and results more so than anything else. And it really is student centric, because again, this is why we are all here, is for you guys to make sure that we create an environment that is conducive to educational excellence. What are your questions, comments?
Go ahead, James.
First, thank you for the work to date and helping us get this started, and Mr. Johns as well. So I see the framework, the first slide or two, you established that, everyone's involved, right? When I saw the, asks and the commitments, maybe I would benefit from understanding what the opportunities are beyond what your ask is, right? So if there's a committee, most committees operate in, public, right? Previous attempts at strategic planning were really inclusive, right? So it is the expectation that publicly announced events are open for board participation, or are you wanting board to be on the periphery and act as requested as reviewers at certain points in times when it comes to deliverables?
I would actually say both. I think we have to be formalized and we have to be accountable in public in the things that we do. There's no intent to veer away from that concept. But when the opportunity arises for some going out into the public or informal settings, being an advocate, an active advocate of this concept, if you will, education, marketing, communication, rallying for the cause, and then just an explanation of what it is. I think there's a lot of misconception about what a strategic plan is. So there's an educational component to this thing so that there is better alignment as to where it is that we're going. Like, does that answer your question? Sure.
And I want to add that I hope I'm speaking for all of us when I say, my understanding is that all the board members are supposed to be involved in strategic planning. Absolutely, through the whole thing, not part, I mean, we've just been helping get it started and doing some of the housekeeping, but every board member is supposed to be part of it.
Just follow. And that was kind of the nature of my question. As I looked at the ask, the ask I'm interpreting as the bare minimum. But, really the goal is for us to be actively providing input, participating, and involved in the full scope of strategic planning. Thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to, oh, go ahead, Andrew.
So this got, there's some discussion about this before. I just want to make sure that, there isn't any confusion about this anymore. So the idea that all of the board is involved in all of the strategic plan, I don't think the intent is to preclude that there might be a community meeting where we're asking the community to draft stuff and bring it back to the board. But a literal interpretation would be that can't happen without all of the board members there. And that did come up in a couple of things that were being said. So yes, the development and the forwarding and the advancing, but I just want to make sure that we don't get hung up on a literal definition of what involved in everything means, right?
I would just like to respond because I'm the one who was making the ask on that slide. And we did want to make it reasonable and flexible with that very understanding. For example, when we did that portrait of a graduate at the Kroc Center the other day, some of us were there and some of us weren't there. And, not everybody can be at everything, but we're asking you to do at least that much as was on that slide, but we're hoping that people will be very enthusiastic and really want to be part of this.
Anybody else? I attended that portrait of a graduate on, I guess it was last Wednesday at the Kroc Center. That was a very wide invitation. Anybody could come to it. And I don't think any of our staff or any of us kind of knew who would come. you know, like, and actually I thought it was a good turnout. I think the people that came were spread over many constituencies. Um, I think the exercise they went through as far as, jotting down ideas and which have been gathered now and will be shared out, I think, at some point, was really good. We wandered and to each kind of group to kind of see what there was, there were themes, there was some common themes that showed up. But the energy was very good, very positive. I came out of there feeling like that this was a very good step forward in the start of this process, and I'm really pretty eager to get at it. So thank you for getting us off on the right foot, and I'm interested to see where this takes us. So, all right. If there's nothing else, then we're going to move on in our agenda. Okay. The next is the consent agenda approval. Would someone like to read the motion?
Need to ask if anyone has to take anything off of it.
Would anyone like to modify the consent agenda? Would someone like to read the motion?
I move that the consent agenda items as presented be approved.
Second.
Go ahead.
I didn't want to have this removed from it, but every meeting we look at, we the gifts report, and I'm always amazed at how generous our community is for just donations. And a lot of time you see the specific interest of someone when they donate something. And I'm really pleased to see a name on here. And I'm kind of eyeing up, I'm watering up a little bit because the memorial for Al Brightlow donated. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Al. He was a fantastic, valuable asset of our community. He was an administrator within the district for many years. He was a teacher. I got to know him as a football official, just a stand-up guy. And when he passed, I was not able to go to his memorial service, but I'm going to guess it was wall to wall with people. So it does not surprise me to see that donation to a very specific group on it. So I appreciate you entertaining me, just kind of celebrating Al one more time, because the guy is a stand-up guy. And when I saw this through our minutes, I called a couple of people that I officiate with that knew him, and they were not shocked, but thrilled to see that. So just a good guy. So.
Thank you, Brian. I'm sorry, did someone read the motion in a second? And anybody else have anything else to say? Go ahead and see.
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to action items. The first is posting of standards. Would someone please read the motion?
I move that pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 120.1213B, the list and description of the 2024-2025 student academic standards in the areas of mathematics, science, reading and writing, geography and history as presented, and with said academic standards constituting the board adopted standards that are required under Wisconsin statute section 118.30, section 1G A, be approved.
Second.
All right, any questions, any discussion? We did discuss we're going to vote on a bunch of things. This was all discussed at the last meeting, but here's another opportunity if anyone wants to take it to ask questions. Okay, Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is B, the Charter for Advisory Committee on Human Growth and Development. Would someone please read the recommended motion?
I move that the Charter for Advisory Committee on Human Growth and Development Curriculum pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 118.019, Section 5, as presented, be approved, and that the membership of the advisory committee be brought to the Board of Education for approval at an upcoming Board of Education meeting.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is review and revisions to the district safety plan. Would someone please read the motion?
I move that the school safety and security plan as presented be approved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is job description updates. Could someone please read the motion?
I move that the job descriptions as presented be approved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is the independent hearing officer resolution for expulsions. Would someone read the motion, please?
I move that the resolution for an authorization and appointment of an independent hearing officer as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion, any questions? Andrew?
I'm gonna vote no on this. I've historically voted no on this. I think the system does a good job. It just, to do it this way, doesn't quite reach my high bar for voting yes. It's not a knock on any of the people involved. I don't think people are having an unfair hearing, or I would be much more vocal about it. But I do think that ultimately on balance, there's not enough reasons for it for me to vote yes.
Anybody else? Kinsey?
Online. Voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried. The results of the individual board member votes are as follows. Becker, no. McCoy, yes. Lyerly, yes. Mills, yes. Gerlach, yes. Crossan, yes. Lee, yes.
Okay, next is F, adoption of policy 345.11. Would someone please read the motion?
I'll move adoption of policy 345.11. High school grade scale, grade point average and class rank, and policy 345.61 early graduation as presented be approved.
Second.
All right, questions or discussion? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is G, 300 and 400 series policy and rule revisions pertaining to 2023 Wisconsin Act 95 and related policies and rules. Would someone like to read the motion, please?
I'll move that the revisions to Board of Education policies and rules as presented be approved.
Second.
Questions? Go ahead then.
I would just like to ask you, Madam Chairman, to do what you always do at this point in our meeting and remind people who are watching and listening that we spent a lot of time talking about these things, asking questions. Okay?
You just did it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
It is a good reminder that it's not like we haven't discussed these, or we did that in the work session earlier in the month, as we always do. This is our last chance for board members to get, if they have further questions or want to discuss it further. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. So, okay. Anybody else? Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is H, initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed $183 million. Would someone please make the motion?
I move that the initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $183 million as presented be approved.
Can you use your microphone? Yeah, yeah,
Second.
thank you. All right, discussion or questions? All right. Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is I, resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed $183 million. Would someone please read the motion?
I move that the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $183 million as presented be approved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Questions or discussion? There's an attachment. You've all read it. It's full of kind of legalese and it's not actually that easy, I think, but it's necessary to have this sort of delineation and have this be legally correct. So go ahead, Lynn.
I just wanted to say in regard to that 12-page document that we got, thank you to whoever did it. I assume it came from our legal department. I don't know. A lot of it, I'm sure, was almost from the city clerk's office, but I read it all and I appreciate it, even though it was difficult.
Yeah, I think a lot of hands, there was a lot in it. Vicky, where does that, is that generated in-house or is that,
It's a team that puts that together.
yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not as simple as just, asking for that. It's gotta be explained in all kinds of legal terminology. So, Does anyone want to have further discussion or questions? We have had plenty of chance to talk about this but this is kind of it. Go ahead, Brian.
Just want to add, we've said many times when we're talking about school finance in Wisconsin and just the policies and the procedure of it, this is a normal process. The budgeting has been responsible. This is something that's been planned, and we just will continue on. It's just how we finance schools in Wisconsin, so.
Yeah. Funding schools by referendum is complicated and arduous work. And this community has a history of supporting its public schools, and I'm proud to live in a community that does that. I'm hoping that we'll be successful this time around as well. But it's a big ask, and I want to acknowledge that as well. So, anybody else? Go ahead, Koo.
I know that the community, because of, we have proposed, many referendums in the past, and I think a lot of people don't understand how all of these came together as in terms of how money is funneled through the state, through the local state institutions here. And I think that this is a really a good step forward in terms of with what Rick and Len is doing, that the board's going to be participating in this to come up with a strategic way how we're going to come out of this. Because I think looking at the Green Bay School District, if you look at how we allocate our resources, I think that nobody could complain that we have the money, the resource in the right spot, but we just right now could not get the results. And I think that with the strategic planning, we could do the analysis in different ways, in different departments and different parts. And I think we're going to come out of it better because of that, because we're going to be able to pinpoint exactly what we need to do. And with that being said, I think Green Bay School District is probably one of the most liveliest, and I think that the potential is there. That I think this is a good beginning. So.
I like your word, lively. And any given day in this district, there are amazing things going on. You guys know that every day, just excellent work. And that's why I feel confident going to the public with this referendum. Again, it's arduous and unpredictable, but we have that community history of supporting our public schools. So go ahead, Lynn.
And I just wanted to share something that I learned just a few days ago about this process. Just again, in case anyone in the community is confused, because I was certainly confused. I said, why do we have to ask the taxpayers if we can borrow money to responsibly improve the school district? And it was explained to me that since 1993, public schools in Wisconsin have to do this by law. We are the only government entities that have to ask the taxpayer or the voters, I'm sorry, approve this. And so that's why we're doing it that way.
Andrew?
I also want to point out that this is a carefully structured referendum. We've done budgeting that has reflected the reality of the need to go to referendum to maintain and improve buildings. And with school consolidations, there have to be some additions to buildings that cost some money up front that will save some money in the long term. Some of the votes to close schools were unanimous, some of them weren't, but now that that's done, we have to properly expand where we need to expand and make facilities a little bigger. It's designed to keep a flat mill rate, a flat tax rate, and that's accomplished by doing these referendums every few years to keep a very steady tax rate. Yes, Unfortunately, we don't have an exemption from inflation and cost of construction materials and labor. If we had such an exemption, then we would be able to it would be able to cost the same as it cost in 2017. That's not the reality anymore, obviously, but the goal is to keep that mill rate low and as flat as possible, and this does this, and I'm definitely on board with this referendum.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we're ready to vote. Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
Okay. All right, that I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, for more information on the district and future meeting dates. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.